Hey guys, welcome back to more neighbor stories. What would you do if a $2 million mansion was built on your property without permission? Let's dive right into the video. This story starts like this. A few years back I managed to get a lot of land in an area where property was being sold for a good price. I got about 2 acres of land and paid under $50,000 for it. I was planning on building a cabin and having a place where I could go camping, since it was near the wilderness and overall just near nature. A far cry from the city where I live, where everything is cramped. Plus, when I was not using it, I could rent it out and try to get some of the money back that I spent on the land and the place that I was gonna build. What I didn't expect was the pandemic to happen, keeping me stuck at home and away from my property for about 2 years. It was not until I got a phone call about a year and a half later from some broker saying that a house on my property was being sold, but there was an issue with the paperwork. Namely, that I was the name on the land but had nothing to do with the sale. I was confused beyond belief and confirmed 3 times that she had the correct property because there wasn't anything built on my land yet. I had to go down there and see for myself and was beyond angry at what I had seen. This was meant to be a relaxing spot for me to get closer to nature, but instead there was a mansion sitting on my property. I wanted to know who was selling it and how this happened. So it turned out that aside from me getting a lot, a bunch were sold to some kind of property developer. He wanted to turn the cheap land into huge homes that would sell for millions. They were refusing to take any responsibility though, and claiming that the builders must have just put it on the wrong lot. Which I found a little bit suspicious when I was able to get the records of which land they actually bought. So they got all of the smallest and cheapest lots that would have never fit a house that size. I wanted to know what their plan was to fix the problem, since I was not going to just give over my land. They gave me 3 choices and all of them felt like I would have been totally getting screwed over. I apparently could either, number 1, buy the $2 million mansion at a discount of 10%, or number 2, swap lots with them where I would get one of their very small lots, not even an acre large. Number 3, they would buy the land from me for the cheap price I paid for it. They were hoping that I was dumb enough to agree to any of this so they could get rich and I would get screwed. I was not having it though, and instead got a lawyer because I was getting ready to sue everybody to make sure that things got solved in my favor. I was gonna sue the developer, the construction company, etc. The main thing that was pissing me off was that since the land was in my name, I was the one paying the property tax. When it was empty land, I was not paying much and it was fine. With a mansion on the property though, I was going to get charged more than I had and wanted to make sure that I was not gonna get stuck with that. Plus there was now a secondary problem that I didn't care too much about since it was not my house. An empty mansion meant people were sniffing around and breaking in. Luckily nobody was squatting there, but windows were broken and a lot of the piping and other built-in things were stolen. For the lawsuit, there was a little bit of the blame game going around. The developer was saying the construction company was at fault for not making sure it was the right lot, and the construction company was claiming it was the developer's fault. And both were blaming me for not paying enough attention to my property and stopping the building before it got finished. The fact that they were trying to blame me just got me angrier and wanting to make sure that they both went down for this. When we got in front of a judge and the entire thing was explained, he was not happy. I showed him the choices the developer gave me because he was dumb enough to do it in writing and got even more upset on my behalf. He agreed that it was unacceptable what happened and that right off the bat I was not at fault. He understood I was stuck because of the pandemic at home and could not really do much in terms of keeping an eye on the property. Between the developer and construction company, he felt like there was enough blame to go around, but the two of them really wanted to fight about it. It came down to a couple key points that showed they were actually both at fault for the entire thing happening. For the developer, the court saw it make no sense that their plan for a home would be on any of the lots that they actually paid for due to the small size. They 100% believed they saw the large lot not being used and took advantage to build the mansion on it and trying to sell it off, hoping they would not get caught. And then when they did, trying to make the problem go away so they could get away with it scot-free. When really it was just property theft and they just wanted to act like it was not a crime. For the construction company, they were also in trouble because when they get a permit to build on a property, they are responsible for making sure everything is in order. Meaning they were meant to either get a surveyor to check the property lines or make sure with the city. Basically doing something that would have let them see the property was not owned by the people paying them to build on it. Instead, they wanted to be cheap and quick and cut corners. assuming the developer was not lying and just built it anyway without spending the extra money. While being lazy is not a crime, negligence is, and it was clear that they were going to be guilty for that. Both of them were getting charges and fines, which was all well and good, but there was still an issue. The issue of the mansion not just vanishing into thin air because they were found to be at fault. The court still had to rule on what was gonna happen and seemed a little bit worried about it. My lawyer said they wanted to be careful because whatever happened could cause more problems if they were not careful. So letting the mansion be and getting sold might cause other developers to do the same. I didn't want to sell anything because I wanted my land and to use it for the purpose I got it. I was not gonna keep a mansion I could not afford the taxes alone on either. It was decided then that the mansion would be demolished at the cost of the developer, losing him even more money and showing people that if you're gonna mess with land in this county, you're going to be the one that gets screwed over, not the owner. This all happened a while ago, but only now has everything kind of come to an end. The mansion gone and my much smaller and I think better cabin being built, letting me get close to nature and even having a lake nearby that I can go and fish at. I know the developer is probably angry about that too, since it would drop the prices of any other big houses he might build here. I can consider that just a happy little bonus though. Obviously, I was also awarded some money from these entitled developers and the construction company because nobody is allowed to just build on your property and essentially damage it without consequences. I don't want to mention the exact amount, otherwise I might dox myself. And here, Ripestars, if some entitled company, developer or whatever would build something on your private property, what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Let us know in the comments. The next one is titled, Neighbors claimed 1,200 square foot of property that's not theirs. So I purchased a house about 2 months ago, had the county survey and marked the property. I don't know why I was curious, but digging through my paperwork, my property is 54 by 140, 7,560 square feet. So I decided to measure it and I have 46 by 140 square feet. So I was looking at the survey map I got and it says 54 feet between my neighbor's fence and my other neighbor's garage. Well, it's not, it's 46 feet. Then I noticed that the county surveyor has the same last name as one of my neighbors. So today the state surveyor came and marked the property lines and my neighbors that share the same last name have 8 by 120 foot of my property that part of their garage, house addition and fence is on. Basically, I spoke to the surveyor and he said it's too late to contest the property lines because it needed to be done within 30 days of purchase. I explained to him the situation with the county guy, he asked for proof and I showed him. He said he'll file a complaint with the survey board and with the state attorney. He also said I needed a lawyer as of now. I've reached out to several real estate lawyers and waiting for consultations. My question I guess is that I probably have to wait for the lawyer, but what are the chances of me getting my property back? Also, will they have to give it back or will I be forced to sell it to them? Edit, the state in question is Kansas. Edit, they've never had any permits issued to their parcel number, city lot number or address. Their house drawing, the county assessor's office, has shown no garage fence or home addition. The surveyor is also the city code enforcement officer. He's supposed to drive around and enforce the code, but now how he never saw his niece adding to her property or cited her or made her pull permits is kind of interesting. I got certified copies of everything yesterday before work. Just in case something miraculously shows up, I have certified copies showing they were not there on the 29th of yesterday. Gonna take everything with me when I meet my lawyer after I wake up. Hopefully I can get my property back. Update to the story, well, last week was a good week, now we wait to see if an appeal is filed by my neighbors, so we won and I got the property back, sort of. The judge said that we could both submit a fair offer on me, what I want for the property and what they are willing to pay for the property. He did say that they are liable for the increased property taxes they avoided, as well as fair rental cost for the duration of the time they have possessed the property. If we cannot come to terms on a sale price, they have 30 days from that time to return the property to me, including removing anything they have on the property. If it is not returned in 30 days, they will be fined by the day in an amount he will rule at that time. My lawyer recommends asking for $500 a square foot, so over $600,000, plus they already have to pay my attorney fees. The city worker has been fired and the judge has ordered the city to audit all his documents during his time of employment. He was also arrested on Friday, but nothing has hit the local papers, so not sure for what yet. My lawyer said they will more than likely appeal once everything is finished. He also claimed that since we won this time based off state precedent, we will win the appeal. So I guess in 60 days I'll get a nice chunk of change or my property back. Update to the story, the following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I got another lawyer. Long story short, my old lawyer had to step down for personal reasons but got replaced by a nice colleague, a sharp but kind woman named Sarah, who was working tirelessly on my behalf. She filed the necessary paperwork to formalize the judge's ruling and sent a formal demand letter to my neighbors outlining the terms of the potential sale. Their response came a week later. They scoffed at my $500 per square foot asking price, calling it outrageous and unrealistic. They countered with a paltry offer of $50 per square foot, barely covering the current market value of the land, let alone the audacity of their encroachment. Sarah was not surprised though. "They are trying to lowball you," she explained, "hoping you will cave under pressure. But we have a strong case and the judge made it clear they are in the wrong." We countered their offer, reducing my asking price slightly, but still well above their lowball attempt. The back and forth continued for a few more weeks, their offers inching upwards, but nowhere near a reasonable figure. Meanwhile, the news about the city worker Mr. Peterson broke. He was arrested for fraud and abuse of office, accused of manipulating property lines for personal gain in multiple cases, including mine. The scandal rocked the small town and the city was scrambling to contain the fallout. As the 30-day deadline approached, my neighbors made one final offer. It was still significantly lower than my asking price, but closer to a realistic figure. Sarah and I discussed it at length. "It's not ideal," Sarah admitted, "but it's a substantial sum and it avoids a potentially lengthy appeals process." I thought about it long and hard. Part of me wanted to fight for every inch of my property, to see them face the full consequences of their actions, but the practical side of me knew that accepting their offer would bring a swift resolution, allowing me to move on with my life without the stress and uncertainty of a protracted legal battle. In the end, I accepted their offer, and it wasn't a complete victory I had hoped for, but it was a win nonetheless. I received a significant sum for the land they had stolen, enough to cover my legal fees and then some. The money was a consolation, but the real victory was the restoration of my property lines. Within a week of accepting their offer, contractors arrived and began dismantling the encroaching structures. I watched as they tore down the fence section by section and then moved on to the garage, its illegal extension crumbling under the force of their machinery. And the next one is titled, "Don't Mess With My Fence." Not my story, but a neighbor's one. We lived in a cul-de-sac with a 90-degree bend 1/3 of the way in. At that point were the gates to a primary school with their grounds on the opposite side of the road to all the houses. I learned to leave for work before 8 o'clock and not try to return home at the end of school between 14:45 and 15:30. It was always a mess, barely room for 2 cars to pass, even if none were parked on the pavement or not. His particular problem was a garden fence that ran along his side boundary adjacent to a 3-foot path. The last post was at the point where a path went from along his property to in front of it. So over a year, parents reversed into this post, mounting the pavement to do so, and with enough speed to break or dislodge the 100mm 4-foot post. He was pissed as it was costing him to replace the post and fence, while the guilty parents just laughed. During the summer break, he replaced the post with an iron I-beam and painted it down. First driver to reverse into it did a good job on their car and knocked on his door demanding compensation, as did the next few. He just laughed, pointed out they were breaking the law by mounting the pavement and 4-inch curb at speed before shutting the door on them. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. The relationship I have with my family is complicated and honestly could take up an entire story. For this, just know that before the events of this story, I had not spoken to my mother in several years. Living in separate countries also made it so I didn't really have much contact with any of the family living in my native country. I went back there to visit and try to make things a little bit more normal again with my family. That was when I learned my mother had passed away 2 years prior, and I did not even know until I got there. I was sad that I never got to say goodbye to her or mourn with the rest of my family down there. I was almost in a total state of shock that only grew when I found out she had left me her home and property. I offered it to my uncle and his family since they were close to her when she died, and I felt they deserved it more than me. They told me though that she even said at the end she wanted me to have it, which made me start crying. I had not been to that house in so many years and she had left it to me despite us having issues in the past. I left and went to go see the property and entered the house for the first time in many years. The first weird thing was, though, the house looked very different, but I brushed that aside to me not being around. Then the keys did not work to the front door, and that was the big sign that sent a bad feeling to my gut. I heard voices, so I knocked on the door and was greeted by a very scared couple. In their defense, they did think that I was trying to break in or something. I explained that I was the owner of the house and confused as to what they were doing there. They told me that they had bought the house from the owner 5 months ago, and that just raised more questions than it did answers. I told them how it didn't make any sense because my mom died 2 years ago, so from that point I would have been the owner. And I obviously did not sell them anything. I got pointed in the direction of the neighbor who happened to also run the HOA. The couple said he was the one that sold them the house. I went next door and knocked until a man opened up looking already annoyed with me. But I didn't care and wanted to know why he had sold a house that did not belong to him. Man: yes. Me: did you sell the house next door? Man: I did. What is it, any of your business? Me: well, that was my mother's house and when she died I inherited the property. You had no right to sell my house to somebody else. Man: you were not here, so I claimed it on behalf of the HOA. It was abandoned and you lost the rights to it. Now get off my property. Me: I'm not leaving or I'm finished with you. I know damn well that my uncle filed the paperwork and the house was transferred into my name. With the city knowing that I was not currently living there and my uncle coming twice a year to maintain it. Man: if you don't leave, I will have you arrested for trespassing. Me: you're the criminal here. I'll admit that I was highly emotional. And his aggressive attitude was not helping me at all. He actually had the nerve to call the police on me for trespassing and complaining about me being crazy when they arrived. I told them how he sold the house and it belonged to me and he was the one that should be getting in trouble. The police told me that if I had a land dispute I could file a report and sue him, but I had to leave his property for the time. You can be sure that I got a lawyer, and I also found out from my uncle that changes to the house were not made by the family. They were made by the HOA guy because he considered it to be an improvement. When in reality he had destroyed very sentimental areas of the home and now those parts only remain in memory. I was even angrier when I found out that and told the lawyer that I wanted to make sure he paid deeply for what he had done. We filed a lawsuit for him stealing the land, illegally selling it, and property damages. In court he had his fancy HOA lawyer and was not worried at all. He claimed that since the land was abandoned he would doing the city and everybody else a favor by taking it over. Claiming that as part of the HOA the home needed to be maintained, so he took it over. That he deserved the profit because he put so much work and money into the renovations to be able to sell it. We argued that neither my mother nor I were ever part of the HOA, so he should not have gotten any kind of control. Even if it was abandoned, the government would have. Second, it was not abandoned and I had the paperwork to prove that, which was another strike against him. Finally, he had no right to destroy parts of the house even if he was going to use the term renovate for it. The third strike and he was out. I won the case easily, but there was a huge issue still regarding the property. It had been technically sold and the couple was still living inside of my house. I had to make some tough decisions that would make things work best for myself. I did not want to stay in this country permanently and wanted to go back home, so I figured making money from other people living in it would be fine. It got worked out that the property was back in my name, but I would rent it to the couple so they could stay, with the money they spent on the home already going to count as payments until it ran out. It was a very odd deal, but the contract was signed, so that worked out. Plus, as owner, no more adjustments could be randomly made. As for the HOA man, he got in some serious trouble for what he had done. He had to give me $450,000, which was a mixture from the profit he made off the sale and for damages done to my home with his illegal renovations. He was also sent to prison for fraud, since selling the house meant he had to go behind several laws to get it done. The HOA as a whole also got disbanded for conducting themselves in improper and illegal actions, meaning they could not be trusted to stay after the stunt that he pulled with my house. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripestories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.